I think we're good.
I'm sorry. I think Jessica said she is on the road and should be here soon. Good morning, everyone. This is Josh Orozco. I see it's 10:02, but we're just going to give a few more minutes to see if we get board members, enough board members for a quorum. So just hang tight. Thank you. And can everybody online hear me okay?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Yes, we can.
Hey, can anybody online hear me? Debbie, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're coming in loud and clear. Thank you.
You're welcome.
They might be.
I didn't mean to kill all the conversation in the audience, so please feel free, converse.
Nope, I don't have your stuff. Oh, you did get a duplicate. I think I might have given you mine. My apologies.
I'm wearing the heels.
That's fine. You holding that on mine?
Oh, yeah.
It's hilarious. Papers this morning. Oh, because she hasn't. No, she's. I don't know.
The agenda, so he might, I'll text her now.
Thank you. Oh, this is fabulous. Yeah, I'm good. Oh, you're right there next to me. Oh, yeah.
All right. I just want to check in, Jessica. How are we doing on quorum?
It's hard because some of the online members are not accepting to be panelists. So board members, if you're online and you get a prompt to be promoted to panelist, please accept, because that's the way that you're going to be able to speak in the meeting. Is that working? Okay.
Okay, okay. All right. I mean. All right, looking around the room, I'm pretty sure we have quorum.
I think so, but we'll do roll call.
So I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting of the New Mexico State Workforce Development Board to order. I've got 10:06. And Jessica, if you could please start us off with roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Johannes Chimueno. Dale Decker. Rebecca Estrada. Present. Deborah Hex. Here, Hex. Philip Ingram. Deborah Moore.
Present.
Yashoda Naidu.
I'm here.
Chair Orozco.
I'm here.
Carlos Romero.
Here.
Mathis Shinnick.
Present.
Commissioner Crunk. Commissioner Sanchez.
Present.
Paul Espinoza. Director Gallup. Secretary Nair. Director Trapp.
Present.
Senator Hamblin. Daniel Schiegel. Carl Adams.
Present.
Carla Kugler. Ashley Long. Kelly Ropek Orth. John Clark. Director Martinez. Secretary Romero. Chair Orozco, after taking roll call, we have reached quorum.
Thank you, Jessica. All right, let's move on to welcome, introduction of new members and opening remarks. We do have a couple of new board members listed here, but these names have been submitted. They have not been finalized, so just FYI. Hopefully we will see them soon. All right, so moving on to the approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to today's agenda? I'm not seeing any changes. And as far as I remember, if there are no changes, we don't need to approve. Thank you, Greg. All right, so let's move on. Approval of minutes. So we have, I think, 3 meetings here. We have a regular board meeting from February 2nd, 2023. We have a committee of the whole meeting on May 4th, 2023, and another committee of the whole on August 3rd. Has everyone had a chance to review these? Is there a motion to approve these all together, or would you like to do them separately? I'll take either way.
I'd like to make a motion that the board, if you have read all three sets of minutes, February 2nd, May 4th, and August 3rd, to make a motion to approve all three as are. I second.
We've got a motion by DJ Heckes and a second by Rebecca Estrada. All those in favor, please say, all those in the room in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Now for those online, can we do a roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Yashoda Nayo,
Yes. Yes.
Board Member Davis, I think there might be some audio issues with one of the board members.
Okay, go on to the next and we'll wait for Bryn to communicate with us.
How about now? Yes.
Great, loud and clear,
Thank you.
Bryn. Thank you. All right. And with that, the minutes from the regular board meeting in February, the committee meeting of the whole on May, and the committee meeting of the whole on August the 3rd are approved. All right. It's been a while since we've had a vote, so it it feels good. Moving on to the next item, the 2024 state plan. Secretary.
Thank you, Chair Roscoe. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarita Nair. It's nice to see you all again. As many of you know, and as many of you have participated in, we are in the final stages of putting together our WIOA state plan. And it's been a really exciting process. We've had over 250 people participate in the input sessions, whether that was in the regional labs or the kickoff, and through the public input forums. And so we had really robust participation. I appreciate everyone who took the time to come out to one of those meetings or to send their written comments. In your board packets, you have an overview of the state plan, and I'm happy to go into it as much detail as you'd like. But what we really wanted to cover today is what's going to happen next at the board level with the state plan. So we are in the process of finalizing the written document. And for those of you who are new to the board, it is an extensive piece of work. It has a lot of input from our core partners, and we're grateful to everyone for sending their timely submissions. But we could get all that together, and we're going to get that to you in December of this year. And then you'll have all of January to review it. And then we'll ask for approval at that first meeting in 2024. And also during that time, there'll be a public comment period that the plan will go out to public comment. And again, we'll have it published on our website and so forth. But our goal, one of our big goals this year, is to really engage this board more in the work of the WIOA state plan, because that's really one of the main functions of this board in concept, but I don't think the board has had the opportunity to be as engaged in it as they would like to be, or as they are in other states. And so one of our goals, if you look at the strategies, and there's an alignment strategy, is strengthening the state workforce development board by improving the committee structure and outlining specific goals and tasks for committees and board members. And that's something that we heard here in this room and also in our input sessions. So the idea is that as you are reviewing the plan and the goals and the strategies, let's think about what, for the data committee, let's think about what kind of data that you would want to see to make sure that we're proceeding apace on the plan. If you're in the policy committee, let's think about what kind of policies might need to be passed to make sure that the plan is effective, for example, around aligned case management. And if you're on the business engagement committee, you've got your work cut out for you, because we have a very exciting and robust plan to do sector strategies. And that's going to really take all of us working together, but especially that business engagement committee. So again, happy to sort of page through this, but we'll have a much more thorough presentation both at noon tomorrow, I think, in the plenary session, or maybe it's 8 o'clock tomorrow. I don't remember. But we have a plenary session tomorrow that will go into a little more detail, and then we'll have a full briefing for this board at your next regular board meeting on the plan. But really just wanted to at this point say thank you, cover any questions you may have, and let you know that that plan is very much the blueprint for what we hope this board will accomplish in the year to come. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Secretary. Are there any questions or comments from the board members? All right, I'm not seeing or hearing any. So let's move on to the next section then. Item 5, SWDB administration. Discussion and vote on the proposed changes to the SWDB bylaws. So this has been some kind of an ongoing project. We've had a few approvals of the bylaws and then a few more approvals of the bylaws. And I think hopefully this will be the last set of approvals we'll need for a while. If you recall, at the last meeting, we presented some changes. We did not have the quorum, so we could not approve those, but I think that was okay because we had some pretty good questions and discussion on some of the proposed changes. So we took that information back, staff put together or took in those and made the adjustments necessary. And that's what we have before us today. This was sent out to the executive committee for comments. I don't believe we had any back. So here it is for us to review today. So there are a lot of changes, lots of red in this document. So just briefly, there were a lot of grammatical changes, changes for clarity. We don't necessarily need to go through all of those. Kind of the highlights, if you will, was simplifying the definition of small business. So if you recall, the Department of Labor wants us to have a small business member on the board, which makes sense. And we had some language in there. We kind of changed that to just make it a very simple, was it 10 employees or fewer? 20, excuse me, to make that simple instead of a lot of calculations that the Small Business Administration uses. Let's see, we took language for designees. If you recall, we wanted to have alternate designees. And that is a strategy to help us achieve quorum. So the idea is that every board member could designate somebody as their alternative that can come in their place, either if they're sick, so once every, few months, or regularly if that's what's necessary. So we have some changes in here looking at that. Basically, that alternative designee would need to go through the same approval process that a board member goes through. They would need to have a high enough position within their organization to represent the interests of that organization and that industry. Also policy level authority. So essentially they're a board member, but they're just an alternative for a regular board member. The other, let's see, clarifying and simplifying language for vacancies, clarifying and simplifying the language for meeting schedule, the use of technology. We had kind of a lot of language in there, wasn't really necessary. And removing proxy voting language. That was another item that had a lot of discussion at our last meeting. Again, that was something to help us with quorum. We could give our vote to somebody else as a proxy. We felt that was an overly complicated system to have within the bylaws. And the goals that the proxy vote sought to achieve is accomplished by having alternate designees. So scrapped proxy voting altogether. And then added language talking about the policy review committee, business engagement, and data committees. Those are the highlights. I'm happy to go through the bylaws page by page if we need to look at them, or I'm happy to go through the highlights individually within the bylaws. I just kind of want to leave it up to the board on what they'd like to do. If they have certain questions from a particular section, we could go there. I just don't want to dive into the bylaws. Yeah, yeah.
I remember.
And spend a lot of time doing that if it's not necessary.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, Mathis.
Okay. Just on the designates, for the small businesses, is the vetting process going to include them being recognized as an executive of the company, such that they have the ability to vote for and decide, issues of that company? There's, CFO, CTO, CEO, COO, all officers, to use that definition of the company. That might help clarify or simplify the vetting process.
Secretary.
Thank you, Chair. So we took the language from the regulations over WIOA because they seem to be a little more broad. So the phrase is optimum. So on page 7, section G,
Right.
the phrase is optimum policy making authority. And so I think, in a corporate context, that can be by virtue of your title, or if you're in a very formal setting, the board or the CEO could do a delegation of authority. But since you'd very rarely be binding the company here, I don't think that there necessarily needs to be that authority. It's really just to represent the company in this context.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think the understanding too is that the board member, the original board member, primary board member, I'm not sure what term we're using, would select somebody who does have that optimum policymaking authority.
And hopefully brief them on the responsibility.
Yeah. And that alternate would also receive the same kind of training that regular board members get too. So yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions about any section? Because the only thing left is a motion and a second. I don't want to go there yet if there are any lingering questions. These are the bylaws. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of happy faces. So is there a motion to approve then?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the proposed bylaws as put forth in the reading today, on behalf of the board.
Thank you, DJ Heckes.
Second that.
And I got a second from Mathis. All right. Let's go ahead and do a roll call vote for this one, Jessica, please.
Yes, Chair. Board Member Johannes Chibueno,
Approve.
Board Member Dale Decker, Rebecca Estrada, Deborah Heckes,
Approved.
Deborah Moore,
Yes.
Yashoda Naidu,
Approved.
Chair Orozco,
Yes.
Carlos Romero,
Approve.
Mathis Shinnick,
Approved.
Commissioner Sanchez,
Yes.
Secretary Nair, Director Trapp, Carl Adams, Debbie Moore.
I've already voted.
Oh, I apologize.
No worries.
Vote is complete.
Did you get Bryn?
I approve.
Brennan Davis.
I approve.
All right. So the bylaws are approved unanimously. Thank you, everyone. This has been a long process, and hopefully the changes we've made, one, will make it for a clear document, but then two, hopefully it'll allow us to achieve quorum more regularly. All right, moving on to item 6, SWDB committees. Well, just a side note, we are blazing through this agenda, which is not bad. So we'll just keep going through. So we've got the policy making. Well, just a quick question. who here is not on a committee? Okay, I just see one. Looks like Commissioner Sanchez is raising his hand virtually. Greg Trapp. And the reason I ask is we've got a number of committees. I didn't know if everybody in this room was already on a committee, so I wouldn't have asked for volunteers in that case. But we have, let me go to our policies, our committee section. We have a policy committee. We have a business engagement committee. We have a data committee. Am I missing one? Data business.
Education coordination.
Thank you. Workforce Education Commission. And then I think there's a youth committee too. And there's the executive committee. I don't know if anybody is interested in serving on one of these committees. That's why we were seeking volunteers. So a couple of things too. I would like to ensure that at least each committee has at least 3 members. Ideally would be like 5 to 7, but enough so that we get a good coverage from around the state. Also, there's enough people so that there's a chair. And for the committees right now, they're not really, with the exception of the business engagement and the executive committee, they're not really active. The plan is next year, once the state plan is done, then we can start focusing on those. So there's not a whole lot to do right now. Also, the idea is that these committees would meet in the months between regular board meetings. Again, so it's not a huge commitment. Is there any interest out there for the executive committee? The executive committee is pretty good. We've got a good number of people, but if there are people who are interested in that committee, now's a chance to volunteer. Yes, Mathis.
Yeah, I think so. We're in the business engagement is one thing, and then I volunteered for the workforce committee. I'd be happy to volunteer for the executive committee if that makes sense. We can talk about that if that makes sense to you. But I'll put my name in the hat and we can talk about
Okay.
it. Okay.
Well, if it's something that you'd want to discuss, we can certainly do that and then make it official at a later date too.
Why don't you, make it official. Put me on there.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Mathis is diving in. All
And can
right.
I talk to someone in December? I got a lot of things going on in November, but I'm interested also.
It's perfectly fine. And in fact, I'm going to keep asking for volunteers until we get all of the committees filled. So yeah, that's perfectly fine, DJ.
Policy review looks short, real short. I think last time I looked, there were 2 of us.
Yeah, the policy committee.
That's a left brain committee.
It is. And you guys are going to have a lot of work ahead of you. So I don't want to scare anybody away, but it's an important committee.
Chair Roscoe, I mean, I'm kind of curious with the policy committee. And I think my only concern is going to be the time commitment, given the various other commitments or responsibilities as county commissioner. But perhaps that's something that I might be able to revisit through the committees and figure out. But I would be interested in participating at least in one of the subcommittees if I could.
Thank you, Commissioner. We'll put your name in the hat for one of the committees. And so I think we're set on the executive committee. Looking at the policy committee, one of the requirements from the Department of Labor was that all of the policies of the state board need to come through and be approved by the state board. So rather than have a policy at every state board meeting, this committee will review policies and give a recommendation to the state board of yay or nay, or make changes within the committee. I didn't want to scare anybody away. A lot of that's going to be on staff. And I think the policy review committee will have members that are not necessarily board members, because we want input from the groups that these policies are going to impact. So I think it's going to be just a meeting where there are a handful of policies that need to be reviewed and then make a recommendation to the board. So there's a lot of work, but it's not going to be too much. So I don't want to scare anybody away. I'm looking at you right now, Trap. Thank you, Greg. All right. So we got you at least 3, Rebecca. Moving on to business engagement. That is one of the committees that has been active. Mathis has been moving forward with that. Are there any companies or anybody who's interested in that committee? You've got a pretty good group so far.
I'm looking at executive and business engagement, but I can't give an answer until after December 1st.
Fair enough. Thank you.
This is Yashoda Naidu, and I'm interested in the Business Engagement Committee.
I'm sorry. Did you say, Yashoda, did you say you are interested?
I'm interested in the Business Engagement Committee.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yes.
Could you list the people that are board
Yeah.
members that are on the committees? Kind of go through them.
That
so
would
we can
help.
make
Sure.
that-
Do we have a list somewhere handy?
There's the one from the minutes, but I don't know if that covers everybody.
Chair, we don't have one at this moment, but by the next meeting, we can have that prepared.
Okay. Yeah, let me- yeah, I'm just looking for the right minutes. May 4th, February.
It's page.
Which minutes?
From the August meeting.
Okay.
That's a very good question, Dale. The data and performance, we have Carlos, who is the chair. Kelly Ropke Orth and Bryn Davis, they are on the data and performance. Policy review is Carla Kugler, who is the chair, and Rebecca Estrada, and Greg Trapp has to be on that one. We have the Workforce Education Coordination Committee. Kelly Ropke Orth is the chair. Rebecca Estrada is on there, as well as Carla Kugler. Business Engagement, Mathis Shinnick is the chair. Carla Kugler is on that. Johannes Kemweno, I'm sorry, Johannes. And then Nash Cisneros are on that committee. And then executive committee is myself. I'm the chair. Carlos Romero, Carla Kugler, Dale Decker, and Secretary Nayers are on those committees. All right. Let's see. We've gone through business
Mr.
engagement.
Chair?
Yes.
If you want, I'll go join the policy guys. I'm always sporting about that stuff.
All right. Thanks, Bryn. Okay, we've done policy, business engagement, executive. What about data and performance? Any volunteers for data and performance? Okay, I'm not seeing anybody. At least they have 3 so far.
Question. I'm sure that there's somebody within the organization. I'm looking at data here. Committee that is the keeper of the data. Should they serve as like, be listed as like, I don't know, ex officio or, somebody so that when you do have those meetings, kind of have you're in line with whoever is in for solutions that is asked with data and that kind of. I don't know who that would be. It is kind of up to the secretary as to who she might put on these committees, but it might expedite the work of the committee, and we might not be reinventing the wheel where it's, where it's already been invented internally and administratively, and we can really provide value add to what workforce solution needs from their business partners and other groups.
That's a very good thing to point out. And that's kind of my assumption. And I guess I should have clarified that. What we're going through here are just who are the board members on these committees. These committees, the assumption is, can also bring in non-board members, which would also include staff from DWS. And I don't want to, it's up to the secretary, obviously, but I would assume that staff would be part of these committees and be the ones that kind of do a lot of the admin stuff. And a lot of, especially for data and performance, a lot of the technical stuff. So yes, I agree with you, and I don't want to put words into your mouth.
So our goal is really that all the committees are staffed, both with, the person who takes over the position that John had previously as the administrator, and by, the technical staff that can support the work of the board. So we have, the head of our business engagement who would come to the business engagement committee. And then we have folks from our economic research and analysis who could staff the data committee and so forth.
Chairman?
Yeah.
Quick comment, before we get off the topic, I'd like to acknowledge the look of interest in Dale Decker's eyes about joining the Business Engagement Committee. You didn't step back.
I'll volunteer. I was on that previously.
All right. Thank you. Let's see. So we've done data performance. We've got, did I do workforce education coordination? I don't think so.
Mr. Chair, can you add me to the workforce?
Yes, sir.
Education Committee?
Thank you. All right. Okay. I think that's all of them. So thank you everybody for your commitment. And like I said, starting next year, especially once the state plan is done, that's when we'll really see work on these committees starting. So thank you. All right, let me find my agenda and my pile of papers. All right, moving on to, and we do have a note to report any committees that have met in the previous or current quarter. And I think executive committee has met a couple times, mainly around bylaws, and business engagement. You've met a couple times?
Yeah, we've met once, actually we've met twice, and we've had different attendance each time, still in the formation stage. Nothing to report back at this point.
Thank you, Mathis. All right, moving on to the next item, chair and board comments. Well, that was a quick meeting. Not that I mind at all. We have a great audience today. Thank you everyone for being here. I know this is very captivating stuff. But I do appreciate it, even though it makes me a little bit nervous. But it's good to see everybody here. Let's see. So are there any board comments? I think I see Johannes, you've got your hand raised.
Sorry, I'm trying to get off camera. No, I don't think I actually have any questions. Make sure.
Okay.
Let me remove my hand. I apologize.
No problem.
I do.
Hi, everybody.
Yes, DJ Hickus.
As a small business owner, I just want to give kudos to the WIOA, the JTC program. I've used it on the youth. I've used it 3 times over in the last 4 years. 2 out of 3 were successful hires. 1 had some personal issues, couldn't work. But I really appreciate that because I get to come in and we train a lot, and it takes a lot for a small business to onboard someone, especially in my marketing business. So I really appreciate all that you're doing.
Thank you for those comments. Any other comments?
This is Mr. Secretary. I know that
I've got one, and just in a general, I had actually sent a message to Dale Decker, but as we form these committees, it might be good to have each committee kind of just outline what I'll call a mission and vision of what the committee's supposed to do. Sometimes when we've gone in this before, we get lost in not knowing what we're trying to accomplish as a committee. So it's just a suggestion.
Thank you, Bryn. Yes, definitely. We want some direction for the committees. And I think the state plan will address that.
Right. So this is a question for the secretary. I know the last time we talked, you were voicing concern. I think other members of the executive committee were concerned about our state's low labor force participation rates, and that you were kind of doing a little bit of a deep dive into that. I'd be curious as to kind of what your thinking is now and how that's going to work in to eventually to the overall state plan, and what role you see the state board taking on to enhance our labor force participation rate. We all know it's driven by job creation, and our state's aggressively pursuing creating jobs through economic development initiatives and cluster focus. But I would appreciate any comments that you might be able to enlighten us all about our low labor force participation rates and how we as a board can help get this at least up to the national average if possible.
Sure, happy to. So just for folks who aren't as steeped in the workforce lingo as Board Member Decker, the labor force participation rate is a rate that measures how many people are active in the labor force. So it takes the number of people currently employed plus the number of people who are unemployed and looking for work. And that's the sort of numerator in the fraction. And then the denominator is the entire population age 16 to 65 and non-institutionalized population of the state. And the way that this is prepared is on a survey basis. So there's a survey that goes out. I've never gotten one. I've never met anyone who's gotten one, but there's the Department of Labor sends out a survey. It hits about 900 households each time in New Mexico. And then based on that, they extrapolate the numbers that represent the labor force participation rate. New Mexico has always had one of the lowest ones in the country as far back as we have data. But it was an alarming trend, especially after the pandemic, that we didn't rebound our labor force participation rate to the same extent that other states did. And I think last time I looked, we're the second lowest, right next to Hawaii. So the question has come up is sort of why? And what we've seen over the past year, since August of last year, is a steady uptick. Now, all of that only amounted to about 1 percentage point. So we went from about 55 to about 56% or 56 to 57. But it is at least moving in the right direction, which it wasn't before. And so when we see now an increase in a slight uptick in the unemployment rate, which is sitting at 3.7% in August of 2023, and then a huge uptick in the number of jobs. So 16,600 jobs created in the trailing 12 months from August 2023. To me, that we won't get the LFPR numbers yet, but that looks like this is an increase in people sort of coming off the bench, moving from not looking for a job and not working into looking for work. And then we know that there are about 34,000 more jobs than there are unemployed people in the state right now. So we have like this inverted labor market. So what we would expect to see now is pretty much anyone who comes into the labor market should be able to move from that unemployed bucket into the employed bucket. So we're hopeful that that is an ongoing trend. We are doing a deep dive in Rachel Moskowitz from our Economic Research and Analysis Bureau is looking at, I think it's 80,000 people longitudinally to see who's coming in and out of the labor market and who is permanently on the bench and who is permanently in the labor force. The theory used to be that everybody kind of moved in this circle from working to not even looking for work and back. But now some of the more recent sort of machine learning has told us that people sort of stay, it's more like a parfait, right? People kind of stay in the employed level and they go job to job. Then there are some people who cycle in between employed and unemployed, but most people who are in that not looking for work at all categories tend to stay there. And so our focus in the statewide plan is really on getting those folks off the bench by identifying what their barriers are, which this deep dive will do. And also making employers aware that some of these populations who historically have underparticipated maybe are worth taking a second look at, especially given the shortage of workers right now. So this will definitely be a measure that we would want the Data and Performance Committee to track. We expect that it'll be rolling out even to the local level plans, but this is something that everyone will be paying attention to.
Can I just?
I was to add, and I know we're going to be bringing in other partners, obviously from the state plan, like PED and other folks. But I think one of the that came out of the legislative session last year that continues to be maybe the statistic that sort of like keeps me up. No, really keep me up at night, but it comes up a lot in a lot of the work that we're doing. Is that 19% of, I believe it's 17 to 23-year-olds who are neither in school nor employed, and of course in the state of New Mexico, and of course we can't get them, right? There's no place where they're necessarily gathering. And so even thinking through as obviously we have these partners that we're working with, and I see there's a lot about the communication strategy. So as we think about fleshing that out, right? It's the same thing, right? They're part of that parfait that I think I hear you talking about and where they fit in there and what strategies we're going to be able to also think through them, because that's also, I think, a workforce that we're we're lacking in being able to communicate with effectively, just mostly because we can't find them, right? If they're neither in school or employed, right, we don't really know where they are. And then the only other thing I'll add is it'll be interesting for those who are unaware of the Workforce Integration Network, which is really what came out of the EDA Good Jobs Challenge grant. You know, I think we're going to have some good pilots now in terms of focusing on their real focus is those coming out of the justice system, the juvenile justice system, and recovery in building and construction trades and in healthcare. So I think we'll have some data as to whether or not we're going to be able. They have their first kickoff in Taos, and it's very employer focused. I mean, that's the central piece of it. So they're having their kickoff in November. So that'll be kind of interesting to see how that data bears fruit. And then the only last thing for those who do work in Moran and San Miguel counties, this is my personal plug. Los Alamos National Laboratory is going to be hosting a roundtable up there with our director, Tom Mason, to talk about the areas that we work with out of the Community Partnerships Office, which is philanthropy, community giving, economic development, workforce development for the region, right? Not just for the laboratory, volunteerism, et cetera, K-12 education. So if anybody's interested in that conversation, that will be happening on November 1st. And I'm happy to send out the information and the registration to Secretary Nair and to Jessica in case anybody wants.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, I just wanted to address that that statistic because I heard it too. I think it was Annie E. Casey came out and said that we have the lowest labor force participation rate for out of school youths. But with the numbers that just came out, so it's calendar year 2022, we actually are showing a 59% labor participation rate for out of school youth. So they're not in school and they haven't graduated, as compared to 50% at the national level. So, you know, the way that I'm starting to see that number is it's two separate problems. I think there are a lot of kids, since our rate is so much higher than the national average, that indicates to me that we probably have a lot of kids who are in the labor force because they need to be. They are the primary income for their family, right? So that's one kind of problem. And then we have the kids who are not in school and not in the labor force, and maybe they're participating in the alternative economy or, you know, doing other things. But that's where we can engage through programs like we have represented here in the room, Job Corps and all the other great programs. But I have started to think about it more as two separate issues rather than just the one. Yeah.
Mathis, did you have a?
Yeah, I'll just, so looking at that bottom layer, you know, my mom used to make parfait. The bottom layer was always the really good part. So focusing on that again, what percentage of that, talk about the youth, what percentage of that are people that have come out of a job that are down there that don't feel that they can go back in because whatever they were doing was no longer that important? So kind of retraining. Do you have any sense or statistics on who in that workforce down at that bottom layer could be brought back in by additional training, new programs?
Mr. Chair, Mathis, I think we clearly need Rachel, who's the actual expert, to come here and talk about all these numbers since you have so much interest, so we can put that on the agenda for next time. But a few groups that are clearly, you know, below the national average in labor force participation include men, young men. I think the age group is 19 to 24, right? 20 to 25, somewhere around there. And they are actually about 12 points lower than the national average. So that is like that's a sign that little age group really needs attention. And then women, both in the early sort of childbearing years, like 21 to 30, and then also in the later years, like 45 to 54, which indicates probably some of that sandwich generation. So people taking care of kids, people taking care of grandkids, people taking care of parents, people taking care of grandparents. So there's definitely seems to be a need to engage parents, especially to say, come back, and especially mothers. And one of the ideas that's been brought up is a initiative called iRelaunch, which is it's a national thing, but Utah has a really good version of it that we're looking at, but it's basically geared at bringing people back into the labor force, exactly what you're talking about, who maybe had a first career, maybe had, you know, first couple jobs that never turned into a career, and how do we bring them back? And rather than calling it like internships or something that you might want to not look at when you're sort of like 40, they make it more of a relaunch of your career. And so, but definitely something that some of our committees can take a closer look at over the next few months.
Great, thanks.
All right, I think I see Greg Trapp, your hand up.
So just a comment. So New Mexico is a state that has a higher number of individuals with disabilities and particular secondary disabilities. So that certainly is something where vocational rehabilitation can come into play. But I think that is one of the reasons why we have a little higher workforce or a little lower workforce participation rate. And my question goes to military spouses. How do they factor in? Certainly with the number of military bases in this state, spouses and partners might be a factor, and they might not be able to be as easily employed. I always consider them to be a untapped resource here.
Mr. Chair, Member Trapp, Director Trapp, that's a great, both great points. So to your first point, people with disabilities are have a labor force participation rate lower than the national average for people with disabilities here in New Mexico. So there's a lot of great opportunity there to engage that population. And you're right that there's probably more people who are disabled to the extent that they cannot work that is driving some of our rate as a whole. In terms of military spouses, I think, whether they're actually showing up in the numbers is one question, because it's all projection based on that population denominator. So are they in there? Who knows? But it's a good point. And one of the other ideas that we've been hearing a lot about is sort of Uber for everything sort of notion of gig workers, temporary workers, and how do we get them more into the workforce on a regular basis. And military spouses might fall into that category of people who might need to be engaged in the labor force in a way that is more flexible and accommodates the fact that they're moving around a lot. So some of those ideas might work together.
Johannes, I think you've got your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think that there's, and it also been discussed at the Business Engagement Committee, definitely an opportunity for small to mid-sized to large corporations. I don't think necessarily that the workforce isn't there, whether it's the gig workers, the seasonal workers, the temporary workers that are essentially looking for employment. I'll give an example of our organization. We receive hundreds and hundreds of applicants for every job that we post. But we have to be diligent as an organization to, go through a needs assessment to say, really, what is it that we need? What are the skill sets that we're looking for before we make any determination of who's going to essentially receive the job that we're hiring for. But I think the other challenge is Dale Decker has mentioned this in other committees before, is the jobs are there for the employers to hire potentially if the business is there and the sales and the transactions are there to support it. And when we look at the workforce and the employers as a whole across the state, whatever sector we're looking at, in terms of Ms. Makowitz's previous economic development research, we need to bring in as a state more outside business. We've looked at offshoring and onshoring the last several years and the opportunity that the pandemic has brought to states like New Mexico, but better engage at a state level on what they can do to help the employers receive large contracts that can sustain and the ability to bring in the workforce that are looking for jobs. I just wanted to make that comment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments, questions from the board? Carlos, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll say a little something since we're talking about data. And I think there's a saying in my business, I do a lot of evaluation of education and health programs. And they say context gives meaning to data. Data without context is meaningless. So that will be one of our mantras for this data and performance committee. And I think I intend to really scrutinize the data and elevate the perspectives of those closest to the work. And I was struck by a study that I saw that came out in an article about the Department of Defense having the best public schools. Has anyone seen that? If you Google it. So the Department of Defense, if it were a state or a district, would be the top one in the country. And they went through the indicators: attendance, discipline, grades, test scores, graduation rates. And then as a footnote, they said, and of course, kids that attend these schools have at least one employed parent in the military. They have housing, they have food, they have healthcare, they have childcare. And I thought that was really obtuse that was the footnote, when to me, that's the whole intervention. And that's the type of perspective I want us to work on, because we've seen this data. We've been swimming in this data for so long. And I think that uncovering the story and not ignoring those other things, you know, the level of trauma, the level of instability that I know is part of my lived experience and probably a lot of the lived experience in this room cannot be discounted. And it doesn't show up in the data a lot of times. And so I intend to scrutinize it. And I welcome co-conspirators.
Well, thank you for that comment. It brings some really good perspective to what we're doing here. Anybody else? All right, I'm not seeing any. I would just like to say I really appreciate the conversation around the labor force participation rate. That's been a worry of mine for a while. And I think it can have the biggest impact on the number of people working in the state if we can move that needle just a little bit. Other than that, I think we've got a wonderful conference ahead of us. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, well, these are my comments. So looking forward to it. It's been a while since we've had one. The last time I was here, I appreciated, you know, getting to meet other people from around the state involved in workforce development. At the time, I was just on the local board, so I didn't really have a sense of who else was doing this kind of stuff. So I'm really looking forward to all the networking and getting to know everybody. So thank you very much for putting this on again. Looking forward to it. Oh, and just a side note, there is a really interesting forum on day 2 about leadership through change. So you may want to check it out. I happen to be on that panel, but of course I'm not biased. All right. Did we have anybody sign up for public comment?
Chair, we did not have anybody sign up.
All right. Well, then we are at the end of our agenda. If on that, we haven't sent out the calendar invites yet, I don't believe, but they're set. I think it's the such and such Thursday of the month.
I believe the 2nd or 3rd Thursday
Yeah.
of February.
And it will be every other month. But what I would like to do, I'm exploring this because I would like to hold meetings in different areas to make it a little bit easier, for people who cannot normally participate to be able to participate, as well as make it easier for the public to participate. But I recognize that's a challenge because there's just so much here in Albuquerque. So it's easy. We have a meeting here for everybody, for more people to attend. But I'll be working with staff to kind of see what are some options with that. Plus, it's kind of nice to see different parts of the state.
I bet you Debbie would appreciate Las Cruces.
Yes, she would. And I love bringing people down to the south, especially a little bit further south into Santa Teresa, but we'll see. We'll see. So I don't want to commit to anything now, but that is something I would like to do.
Josh, this is Debbie. I think that's a wonderful idea.
I think you and Commissioner Sanchez would both agree.
Absolutely.
Indeed, yes, of course.
All right.
Yeah,
I'll
Brent.
probably be in Albuquerque that day.
All right. So with that, no public comments. We're at the end of our agenda. So if there are no objections, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Here's an afterthought. I'm speaking at 3 o'clock today on communications in a workout.